Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back. Way back. To when fire was new, when you could still smell the sharp tang of stone and smoke in the cold air, and some scruffy ancestor of yours crouched near the flames wondering what would happen if they tossed in a strange, smelling plant. You're about to sit beside them, watching that first curl of aromatic haze twist toward the stars. You probably won't survive this. Well, not if you actually had to live in the Ice Age. But don't worry, you only need to listen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm curious, too, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing those sleepy check-ins from every corner of the planet. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit on a dirt floor, lit by a hungry orange fire. The people around you wear furs that smell of musk and ash. Someone's beating a rhythm on a hollow log. The wind outside hisses through grass taller than a person, carrying the scent of wet earth and something herbal. Sharp, dry, slightly sweet. You watch as one of the group, a figure with tangled hair and clever eyes, tosses a handful of dried plants into the flames. Smoke flares up, and everyone leans closer, half expecting spirits to appear. Historians still argue whether those early humans understood anything about intoxication, or if it was just curiosity mixed with boredom. But the archaeological record, yes, that's your bedtime reading now, suggests people were burning aromatic herbs for ritual long before they knew about THC or chemical structures. Some caves in Central Asia hold ancient braziers filled with charred cannabis seeds. And even though we can't ask those ancient smokers what they were feeling, you can imagine the drowsy hush that followed. A mainstream historical fact here, by around 5000 BCE, humans had already domesticated cannabis in parts of modern-day China. They weren't rolling joints, they were weaving ropes, twisting fibers into nets, pressing seeds for oil. But plants don't stay in one lane. The same stalk that gave you rope also carried resin that could calm pain or stir visions. You lean closer to the imaginary fire, feeling its warmth pulse on your cheeks. It's not hard to picture that moment of discovery, a flicker of curiosity, the air thickening with smoke, laughter starting for no reason at all. Maybe that's the first recorded case of, "Whoa, did you feel that?" in human history. You trudge forward through time like a sleepy traveler crossing fog. The Ice Age melts away, mammoths retreat, and grasslands bloom. Nomads follow herds, carrying pouches of seeds and memories of that fragrant smoke. Somewhere in what's now the Altai Mountains, you crouch beside another campfire. Different people, same wonder. They grind herbs with stones, hum low chants, and toss the powder onto glowing embers. The air turns sweet, then dizzying, a quirky tidbit for your dreams. Scientists once found an ancient tomb in western China with nearly 2 pounds of preserved cannabis flowers buried beside a shaman. The flowers still shimmered with resin after 2 millennia underground, which means some long-gone spiritual leader went to the afterlife well, prepared for a mellow eternity. You can almost hear him whisper across time, "Relax, traveler." The body fades, the smoke drifts, but the story lingers. The narrative glides onward. You're now wandering with the earliest cultivators, people who noticed that some hemp plants looked and smelled different. They saved those seeds, re-planted, and, accidentally or not, began selecting for potency. Evolution by experimentation. While you're half dozing, they're discovering cannabinoids. You can thank them later. Your path drifts along ancient riverbanks where families rinse hemp fibers in muddy water. The scent clings to their skin. Children laugh, weaving little ropes. A dog sneezes in the smoke from a nearby hearth, and you almost laugh too, imagining the first accidental hotbox. Historians still argue whether those early users were truly smoking cannabis or just inhaling incidental fumes from incense and ritual fires. But whether intentional or accidental, that connection, fire, plant, breath, became part of human ritual. The concept of burning something to reach the divine flickers across cultures like a shared dream. You move through centuries of twilight. Sparks rise, civilizations form, and people start naming the world sky, river, mountain, seed, smoke. Language grows, and with it myth. In your sleepy mind, stories swirl. A hunter who sees visions in the smoke and learns where to find game. A healer who feels the plant's calming touch and calls it sacred. Here's a quiet fact: to drift on hemp fibers have been found in pottery fragments over 10,000 years old. That means someone was experimenting with this plant before they'd even invented metal tools. You imagine that kind of patience. Waiting weeks for a plant to grow just to see what happens when you twist it. There's a lull now, like the pause between breaths. The fire pops. A spark dances upward, and for a moment it's easy to think you're watching human curiosity itself. Bright, unpredictable, always reaching. You drift through another scene: dawn light, a wide plain, dew on the grass. A figure crouches beside a smoking pit, eyes half closed, murmuring thanks to invisible ancestors. The smoke curls around you, tickling your nose. Maybe you cough softly, the way people always do when they try something new. Then comes the warmth, the slowing heartbeat. The faint sense that time is stretching like taffy. A fringe theory, whispered among anthropologists. Some even suggest early religious experiences, visions of gods, spirits, cosmic animals, might have been born from plants like this. Not necessarily cannabis alone, but the idea that altered perception became a doorway to myth. You feel that thoughts settle like dust, soft, heavy, ancient. The night stretches. You pass herds of aurochs and rivers lined with reeds. The first cities flicker on the horizon: clay walls, flickering torches, clay tablets full of pictographs. Hemp appears again, listed among trade goods, taxed by rulers, stored in jars beside grain. It's the background noise of civilization, quietly indispensable. Another mainstream fact: before you drift too far, in Mesopotamia, records mention oils pressed from seeds that sound suspiciously like cannabis, used for soothing pain and inflammation. No joints, no pipes, just oil and smoke, practical magic in a bottle. You wander through that market, feeling the press of people and the hum of barter. A merchant lifts a small clay pot, uncorks it, lets you sniff. Earthy, nutty, faintly spicy. You nod approvingly, though you have no silver to trade. Somewhere nearby, another stall sells incense cones made from resins and herbs. The smoke rises in lazy spirals, and you realize how universal the gesture has become. Burn, breathe, believe. Every civilization seems to discover the same comfort. A little haze between the self and the world. You pause to rest on a low wall. The stone feels cool beneath you. The air carries music, flutes, maybe, and a language you don't recognize. But you understand the tone end of day chatter, relaxation, maybe a faint giggle from someone who inhaled a little too much sacred perfume. Historians still argue whether cannabis spread east to west, or the other way around. The plant itself doesn't care. It just grows where humans carry it, rooting in new soil, waiting for the next curious hand. You close your eyes and picture seeds tumbling from a traveler's pouch, sprouting beside a trail. Wind, time, and curiosity do the rest. That's the quiet engine of history. Right there, someone wondering what will happen if they try. The scene shifts again. You're by the Caspian Sea now, salt wind in your hair. Nomads lead shaggy horses, their saddlebags heavy with grain, salt, and bundles of herbs. When night falls, they make a small fire and toss in a few leaves for luck. The smoke rises, the horses snort, and the humans laugh, half dreaming, half singing. A quirky note to tuck under your pillow: some Scythian burial mounds contained golden bowls with traces of cannabis and opium mixed together. The ancient equivalent of a multi-herb diffuser, though probably less relaxing than your lavender candle. You wander among them in the dim light of the steppe moon, hearing drums far away, feeling that pulse through your chest. Smoke rhythm, heartbeat, each one older than recorded history. Somewhere inside you, a quiet recognition stirs. You realize the habit of seeking comfort, of chasing calm through ritual, is as old as humanity itself. Whether it's smoke, song, or scrolling through sleepy videos before bed, it's the same instinct: soften the edges before rest. The fire before you gutters low. Sparks fade to ash. You breathe in one last trace of the ancient scent, earth, oil, sweetness, and let it anchor you. Time is a circle. You're sitting by the first campfire, and your phones glow all at once. As your eyelids grow heavy, one last thought drifts through the smoke. History isn't a line of dates, it's a series of little experiments that never quite end. Someone long ago tried burning a strange plant and thought, that feels nice. And thousands of years later, you're here, cozy and curious, learning their story, as the same invisible molecules still dance through air and memory. The embers crackle softly. Night thickens. You can almost hear the whisper of that first smoke curling upward, carrying the beginnings of everything you now know. You're still beside that dying campfire, its last embers breathing in slow red sighs. When you finally stir, the world around you has changed. The ice age has loosened its grip, rivers wind lazily across green valleys, and small clusters of huts smoke gently in the morning light. You stretch, feeling the faint ache of centuries in your shoulders, and watch early farmers bending over rows of young plants. Their hands move with a rhythm you already know. Dig, drop, cover, water. The air smells alive. Somewhere nearby, a woman is grinding roots in a smooth stone bowl, humming a tune older than any alphabet. The liquid she pours off is bitter, but she drinks it anyway, trusting the plant to heal what she cannot name. Historians still argue whether this was intuition, trial and error, or something closer to spiritual conversation. Maybe all three. Whatever it was, it worked often enough to keep the practice alive. The main historical fact that anchors you here, by the dawn of agriculture, roughly 10,000 years ago, humans had catalogued hundreds of medicinal plants. Written records would come later, but the oral maps, the stories of what heals and what harms, already passed from one campfire to the next like guarded treasure. You walk among baskets filled with leaves, roots, and dried flowers. Each one has a smell, a memory mint for the stomach, willow bark for pain, poppy sap for dreams. It's a living pharmacy with no labels, only trust and repetition. A fringe tidbit drifts your way. Some archaeologists think that ancient healers marked safe herbs with little charms made of bone or clay. Imagine a pendant etched with the symbol of a leaf, worn close to the heart, so you'd remember which plant to pick. No written language, but a wearable recipe. The sun warms your back as you wander into another scene, a clearing dotted with huts made of reeds. Here, smoke curls from clay pots. People toss handfuls of herbs into the steam, not to get high or holy, but to clean the air, to keep spirits, or maybe mosquitoes, away. You breathe in deep, and your nose tingles with sage, thyme, and something citrusy. A small child sneezes and giggles. You catch yourself smiling, realizing you're watching humanity invent aromatherapy long before the word existed. The narrative drifts onward like mist. You cross dry deserts where traders lead caravans heavy with resins, frankincense, myrrh, storax, each worth more than gold because people believe these scents carry prayers upward. The smell of burning resin has followed humans through every century since, a shared comfort against the unknown. Historians still argue whether incense began as medicine or as magic. The line blurs quickly. Both make people feel better. Night falls again. You lie on woven mats beside travelers, telling stories of plants that shine in moonlight, or vines that sing when the wind passes through them. The air hums with superstition and wonder. You realize how often healing begins with imagination. In the dim glow, an elder reaches for a clay tablet. She traces simple symbols into soft wax, her record of which herbs ease fever and which cause it. This will become one of the first pharmacopoeias, though she doesn't know that word. She only knows that stories fade, but marks last. A mainstream fact to anchor you in ancient Sumer, around 3000 BCE, healers listed plant preparations for nearly every ailment. Headaches, tooth aches, the trembling of the limbs. The instructions often included both the herb and the chant to be said while applying it. Medicine and music mixed freely. You can hear the chant now, slow and low like a heartbeat. The air trembles. Maybe it's your imagination. But for a moment you feel the faint lift of calm the patient must have felt millennia ago. Another quirky image, somewhere in a river village. A healer's apprentice accidentally sneezes into the powder she's mixing. Everyone laughs. The powder puffs into the air, and half the hut starts sneezing too. The first recorded instance of, oops, that's potent. You smile, drifting between humor and history, feeling how human this all is. Messy, curious, endlessly experimental. Your journey carries you east, where fields of reeds shimmer under the rising sun. Along the riverbanks, early Egyptian farmers cultivate blue lotus and papyrus. The lotus blooms at dawn, closes at dusk, and becomes a symbol of rebirth. Priests paint it onto stone walls, its petals curling around the faces of sleeping gods. Historians still argue whether the lotus held actual medicinal properties or served purely as a metaphor for awakening. Either way, the Egyptians valued it so deeply they included the flowers in burial rituals, just in case the soul needed a little fragrance on its way to eternity. You wander through those painted corridors. The air smells of dust and honeyed resin. Somewhere behind you, a scribe coughs softly while grinding herbs for perfume. A cat stretches beside him, completely unimpressed by the grandeur of human belief. Your eyelids grow heavy as the story meanders through centuries of gardens. Babylon's terraces overflowing with mint and hyssop. Greek courtyards alive with laurel and sage. Every culture tends its own green sanctuary, each leaf a page in a wordless encyclopedia. You notice a pattern emerging wherever humans go. They cultivate two things: food and comfort. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're separate, but always there's a patch of earth reserved for the strange, the soothing, the maybe magical. A soft breeze moves through that idea, carrying scents from every direction. Lavender from the Mediterranean hills, cinnamon from tropical coasts, a hint of pine from the far north. It's like the planet breathing in unison, each breath full of leaves and possibility. You let that image settle as your thoughts slow. Somewhere, someone thousands of years ago might have looked up at the same stars and wondered which plant could calm a restless heart. The answer, you suspect, was less about chemistry and more about ritual. The comfort of doing something, of making tea, of lighting a little smoke, of whispering a word to the night. The fire before you fades again, its last spark turning to dust. You stretch, feeling time move like water over smooth stone. History has carried you from raw roots to gardens of gold, and you're only just beginning to understand how deep the human need for calm really runs. You blink, and the last scent of herbs fades into something softer, the smell of linen warmed by body heat, of straw crushed beneath fabric, of clean night air slipping through a window crack. You're no longer beside a campfire. You're standing at the edge of a small shelter, and inside, people are settling down for sleep. The floor is dirt, but someone has lined a shallow pit with dried grass. They climb in, curl up, and vanish beneath furs. You realize you're looking at one of humanity's earliest beds. Nothing fancy, but a small miracle of comfort. a place to stop wandering for a few hours. Historians still argue whether our ancestors first slept on raised platforms to avoid damp soil or to dodge curious creatures with too many legs. Probably both. Either way, the discovery of a dedicated sleeping space marked the beginning of domestic life, the invention of rest by design. A mainstream fact for you to float on, and archaeologists in South Africa found a 200,000-year-old bedding layer made from compacted grasses and aromatic leaves, perhaps chosen to repel insects. Imagine that. The first documented mattress, courtesy of ancient interior decorators with good instincts. You crouch beside it, brushing the dust of time from its surface. The grass crumbles softly under your fingers. You can almost feel the warmth of someone who slept there last night, though last night was 200 millennia ago. A quirky tidbit to dream on. Some researchers think early humans added ashes beneath the bedding not for comfort, but because insects dislike fine ash. So yes, housekeeping is older than civilization itself. You watch as the sleepers exhale. Their breaths make tiny clouds in the cold air. One turns, murmuring something unintelligible, but the tone is universal. A sleepy protest, the sound of every person who's ever tried to get 5 more minutes. Time folds again. You drift into ancient Egypt, where nobles rest on wooden frames carved like animals, their heads supported by curved stone headrests. You can almost feel the chill of it on the back of your neck. Supportive, maybe, but not exactly plush. A servant nearby fans away mosquitoes with a palm frond. Sleep here is both art and luxury. Historians still argue whether Egyptians saw sleep as a rehearsal for death or simply a necessary pause. Either way, they treated the bed as sacred space. In hieroglyphs, the symbol for sleep is a little man curled under a roof, a miniature version of the same posture you're in now, listening, half awake. The narration drifts onward to Greece, where philosophers debate whether dreams come from gods or from digestion. The beds are simply wooden frames, rope lattices, layers of wool. You imagine Plato adjusting his blanket before delivering a lecture on the ideal nap. Another factual anchor. Romans perfected the portable bed. Soldiers carried folding cots made of bronze and wood. Early prototypes of the camping gear you might use centuries later. You picture a legionnaire unrolling his bedding after a long march, sighing the same sigh you make when you finally get home. A fringe theory whispers through the dark. Maybe civilization itself grew out of this urge to make sleeping safer, to build walls, roofs, and communities around the simple act of lying down. It's not impossible. Comfort has always been a strong motivator. You cross into medieval Europe. Straw-filled sacks line cottage floors, their contents crawling with the occasional flea. The phrase, the hay, starts to make literal sense. You imagine yourself fluffing a lumpy sack, muttering good-natured complaints. 3 jokes per 1,000 years, remember. Here's one. The first recorded argument about who hogs the covers probably happened before written language. You move quietly through a castle hall where nobility recline on feather mattresses, so thick they look like clouds tethered to the earth. Servants warm stones by the hearth, slip them under blankets, and whisper goodnight in candlelight. It's a world of snores and status. Historians still argue whether peasants slept in one long stretch or in 2 phases. A first sleep, then a quiet period for talking or praying before dawn. Evidence suggests the latter, meaning your ancestors may have been midnight snackers before it was cool. Outside, winter presses against the shutters. Inside, you hear soft breathing, the tick of cooling embers, the slow rhythm of humanity resting in unison. Another quirky detail during the Renaissance. Wealthy families treated beds as family heirlooms, frames too ornate to move, passed down like titles. The guest bed often occupied the main room, so visitors would literally sleep in the center of household life, wrapped in embroidered sheets and gossip. You linger by one of those grand beds, tracing your fingers over carved posts shaped like vines. The air smells faintly of beeswax and lavender. Someone left a small bundle of dried flowers beneath the pillow, believing it would keep nightmares away. You take a slow breath, half hoping it works for you too. Then the centuries begin to hurry. Looms hum. Cotton spreads from field to factory. Mattresses evolve from straw to springs to soft, ticking stuffed with wool. The industrial age hums you toward modernity, and comfort becomes a business, a mainstream fact to cradle you. In the 19th century, the coil spring mattress was patented, turning sleep into a blend of science and salesmanship. For the first time, comfort could be mass-produced. You can almost hear the pitch, "No, with extra bounce!" echoing through a Victorian showroom. Still, even with new inventions, sleep remains deeply human. The sigh when you sink down, the tug of warmth, the half-dreamed memory of a safer place. You drift through a century of bedrooms, iron frames, lace canopies, ticking clocks. The world keeps speeding up. Sleep becomes rebellion. Historians still argue whether the light bulb improved life or just shortened rest. When night lost its darkness, humanity gained a little freedom and lost a little dreaming. You lie back under the sudden glow of electric light, feeling the hum of progress just beyond your eyelids. And yet, even in cities buzzing 24 hours a day, people chase the same peace those early grass bed sleepers found. The materials change, the rituals stay. A glass of water on the nightstand, a quick glance at the door lock, the slow exhale into oblivion, a final quirky image before you drift off. In the 1960s, designers experimented with waterbeds, advertising them as futuristic luxury. In reality, they were just reinventing the ripple of the riverbank where early humans once napped. History, it seems, has a good sense of humor. You stretch, roll to one side, and feel the centuries settle like blankets. Straw becomes cotton, wood becomes metal, stone pillows become memory foam. Every improvement is just another lullaby written in fabric. You imagine the next step. Beds that adjust themselves, that glow softly when you breathe, that hum gentle white noise. But even then, the oldest part of the ritual will remain closing your eyes, trusting the dark, and letting time slip quietly past. Somewhere, deep down, the first dreamer turns over in that ancient bed of grass and smiles. You wake slowly, as though surfacing through layers of cloth. Something soft is under your cheek, woven fibers, faintly scented with herbs and dust. You blink, realizing you're lying on one of the earliest pillows ever made. It's not plush, not feather-filled. It's carved from stone, polished smooth by countless heads. The shape fits the curve of your neck, like a cradle made by someone who understood the language of sleep. Historians still argue whether these first pillows were meant for comfort or for status. In ancient Mesopotamia, only the wealthy owned them. Poorer sleepers relied on folded cloaks or bare arms. But even a hard stone, raised just enough to keep scorpions off your face, was a kind of luxury. You run a hand along its surface, cool and steady, then stand. Around you, the city hums. Bakers, potters, the lowing of animals. Inside one narrow house, a woman stuffs a small linen sack with reeds, testing its give. You watch her press it under her chin and nod, satisfied. The pillow has evolved. A mainstream fact to rest on by 700 BCE, Egyptian nobility were already using headrests shaped from ivory and wood, decorated with protective gods. They believed these figures guarded the sleeper's dreams. The body might rest, but the soul needed supervision. You pass into another scene, ancient China, where artisans mold ceramic and jade pillows painted with cranes and clouds. They're cool in summer, heavy in hand. Some carry inscriptions promising clear dreams and pure thoughts. A beautiful irony, chasing soft sleep through the hardest materials imaginable. A quirky tidbit floats through your drowsy thoughts. One excavated pillow hides a secret compartment. perhaps for herbs or charms to improve sleep, or maybe for keeping small valuables close during the night. The first, onto the pillow savings account. The centuries slide by. You find yourself in Greece, where beds grow more ornate and pillows multiply. Stuffed with feathers or wool, they cradle poets and soldiers alike. You can almost hear the rustle of linen as someone recites lines to the ceiling. Comfort becomes both a need and a metaphor. Softness as civilization itself. Historians still argue whether the Greeks borrowed their bedding habits from Eastern neighbors or invented them independently. But either way, the pillow becomes an emblem of refinement, a quiet rebellion against the hard earth. Now you drift northward, where winters demand more than a cushion. Furs pile up, layered thick against stone walls. Blankets are born from necessity, hides sewn together, then woven wool, then tapestry. You wrap one around your shoulders. It smells of smoke and sheep, rough but reassuring. A mainstream fact to warm you: the earliest woven blankets likely appeared around 1000 BCE in Central Asia, made from undyed wool. Their patterns weren't decoration at first. They were structural, the natural rhythm of hand. Loomed fibers crossing over and under. Heartbeat turned textile. You travel onward to medieval Europe. In candle-lit rooms, the wealthy lie beneath coverlets embroidered with family crests, while peasants share rough wool throws that itch but hold heat. The phrase, blanket statement, hasn't been invented yet, but you sense it in spirit, a one cloth covering all. A quirky note for you. Monasteries often assign specific blankets to specific monks, labeled with stitched initials, as if holiness depended on organized bedding. Somewhere, a sleepy brother surely mixed them up and sparked a theological debate about who owned whose warmth. The air grows cooler as you wander into the Renaissance. Textiles flourish. Velvet, brocade, silk. The vocabulary of comfort expands. You brush your hand across a crimson coverlet so smooth it reflects candlelight like water. Somewhere nearby, a tailor yawns over a spool of gold thread, finishing a commission for a noble who insists that luxury aids morality. Historians still argue whether this era's obsession with fabric was practical or pure vanity. But either way, the bed becomes a stage. Pillows piled high, curtains drawn, every fold choreographed. Even sleep performs. You move quietly through these rooms of history, each softer than the last. Time folds again, and now you're in a farmhouse lit by oil lamps. A mother shakes out a quilt, squares of faded cloth, stitched from years of family life, old shirts. Wedding linens, pieces of curtain. She spreads it over her children and hums until their eyes close. Another mainstream fact: the American patchwork quilt emerged from scarcity. Colonial women reusing worn fabrics, but evolved into art, storytelling, and legacy. Each stitch a sentence, each color a memory. You trace those patterns with your fingertip. Stars, diamonds, flowers. History wrapped around the sleepers, like a diary they'll never need to read aloud. A quirky moment lulls you. One recorded superstition warned against finishing a quilt on a Friday, lest bad dreams tangle in the thread. So some households left a single stitch undone until morning, just to let luck breathe overnight. You smile, imagining centuries of seamstresses whispering, "We'll finish tomorrow," in the same tone you used to postpone your alarm. The world spins faster. Machines arrive. Cotton fills factories, feathers fill ticking. The industrial pillow becomes democratic. Everyone, finally, can rest their head on softness. Advertisements bloom promising. Cloud, like sleep. Though no one quite explains what a cloud feels like. Historians still argue whether industrialization truly improved rest or simply multiplied choices. But as you stroll through a century of bedding catalogues, the colors and patterns blur into a single truth: humans never stop trying to perfect the art of being still. You wander into the 20th century, where synthetic fibers hum beneath fluorescent lights. Foam replaces feathers, polyester replaces wool. Designers promise hypoallergenic dreams and ergonomic alignment. You picture a lab coat adjusting a pillow, murmuring, comfort optimized. And yet, amid all that science, the ancient rituals persist. Someone still fluffs the pillow twice, smooths the sheet edge, and folds a blanket at the foot of the bed exactly so. You realize that softness has always been half material, half gesture. A quirky image to keep. In the 1970s, a few inventors created sound pillows, speakers hidden inside so sleepers could hear ocean waves. Early ASMR, minus the internet. Most listeners reported either tranquility or confusion. Proof that relaxation, like art, resists standardization. Now the world dims again. You're in a quiet bedroom, lit by nothing but moonlight. The blankets around you are heavy enough to feel like protection, light enough to breathe through. Weighted blankets, scientists say, can calm the nervous system by gentle pressure, a rediscovery of the same instinct that made those first grass beds comforting. Historians still argue whether modern sleep gadgets bring genuine rest or simply mimic old habits with new tech. Either way, you find yourself sinking back through time, layer by layer. Wool to fur to reed to stone. Each generation added softness, but the goal never changed. A safe place to let go. You close your eyes. Beneath you, all the pillows of history stack like geological layers. Above you, blankets from every century drift down. Woven clouds, stitched stories, hand-spun sighs. And somewhere, in the hush between heartbeats, you sense that the perfect bed has always been less about fabric and more about feeling wanted by the night itself. You lie still beneath centuries of blankets, and the world around you exhales. Somewhere in the dark, a candle flickers, a whisper of ritual begins. Before sleep, people have always done something, some gesture, some sound, some scent, to coax the mind toward stillness. You feel that urge tugging at you even now, a quiet choreography written into muscle memory, long before memory itself. Historians still argue whether the first bedtime rituals were spiritual or simply practical. Either way, they began with light, specifically, the absence of it. When fire was young, someone had to make sure the embers would last until morning. You picture an ancestor kneeling beside a hearth, covering coals with ash so they'd smolder through the night. That act, protecting the flame, was both safety plan and prayer. A mainstream fact to rest on. Early hearths in prehistoric homes were carefully maintained through evenings, sometimes tended by designated night watchers. The job title might as well have been guardian of sleep. The room fades, and you're standing in an ancient village at twilight. Families finish eating, the air thick with wood smoke and laughter. Someone sprinkles herbs onto the fire, not for visions this time, but for aroma and insect control. You breathe in sage, thyme, a trace of mint. Children yawn. A dog circles its mat 3 times, performing the oldest bedtime dance on record. A quirky tidbit to amuse you before dreams claim you. Researchers studying animal behavior found that dogs circling before lying down probably trace back to their wild ancestors tamping down grass. So yes, the nightly spin before bed has a 100,000-year pedigree. The scene shifts. You wander through an Egyptian home circa 1500 BCE. Servants snuff out oil lamps, leaving only one wick burning in a polished alabaster holder. A woman rubs perfumed oil on her wrists, murmurs thanks to household gods, and drinks a sip of beer mixed with honey. Nightcap of the Nile. Outside, frogs croak, water laps against the banks. You realize you've walked into the world's first evening routine. Historians still argue whether these rituals were primarily hygiene or devotion. Probably both. Cleanliness kept disease away, prayer soothed fear of the dark. Darkness, after all, was dangerous, a time for thieves, jackals, and unsettling dreams. The narrative glides forward to ancient Greece, where the air smells of olive oil and cool marble. You pass small shrines tucked beside beds. Before sleeping, families pour a few drops of wine on the ground as an offering to household spirits. Someone recites a line from Homer, not for entertainment but for comfort. The way you might hum a tune under your breath before closing your eyes. A mainstream fact: Greek households honored Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Her flame was rarely allowed to go out, linking daily life to cosmic order. To sleep under her watch was to trust the world would still be there at dawn. Now you cross the sea to Rome. A wealthy matron dips her fingers in scented water, sprinkles her couch with rose petals, and orders a slave to lower the lamp wicks one by one. Sleep arrives with ceremony. For poorer citizens, the ritual is simpler: a quick hand-washing, a whispered thanks to Fortuna, maybe a crust of bread saved for tomorrow's breakfast. You can sense the same tenderness in both acts, an attempt to make peace with the day. Historians still argue whether bedtime prayers in these cultures were superstition or the psychological invention of relaxation. Modern science might say both explanations fit neatly on the same pillow. The centuries drift like clouds. Candles replace oil lamps, linen replaces wool. Every culture adds a note to the symphony of evening. You smell frankincense in monasteries, sandalwood in Indian temples, cedar smoke curling through cedar doors in Japan. Each scent tells the same story. The mind needs fragrance to mark the threshold between doing and dreaming. A quirky moment in Tang, Dynasty China, scholars compiled lists of auspicious sleep postures. Sleeping facing north, they said, promoted long life. Facing west invited early death. Imagine that nightly mental math. Did I aim my pillow the wrong way? The ancient equivalent of checking if you locked the door. You pass into medieval Europe. A bell tolls compline in a monastery. Monks chant psalms, their voices low and steady, blending with the soft hiss of rain on stone. One by one, they bow, extinguish candles, and retreat to narrow cots. The sound fades until only breathing remains. It's not silence, it's community sleeping in harmony. Outside those walls, villagers close shutters, set out charms against bad dreams, and recite little rhymes that sound like lullabies. A mother rocks her child beside the fire and hums, "Now I lay me down to sleep." You realize lullabies are humanity's universal password to dreams. Their melodies differ, but their purpose is identical: to convince small hearts that darkness isn't the enemy. A mainstream historical fact: the oldest known lullaby inscription dates back over 4,000 years on a clay tablet from Babylonia. The lyrics plead with a baby not to cry lest the household gods be angered. Parenting, it seems, has always involved creative negotiation. You drift on through the Renaissance, where candles multiply like stars. In wealthy homes, attendants light perfumed tapers, musicians play soft airs, and someone reads aloud from a favorite poem. Books become bedtime companions. Stories evolve from sacred to secular, from prayer to pastime. The ritual of reading before bed begins here, in candlelight and velvet. A fringe idea scholars still discuss. Some believe that reading aloud at night helped standardize language, families learning pronunciation together while half asleep. If true, then modern grammar owes a small debt to bedtime boredom. Now it's the 18th century. Tea has conquered the world, and with it arrives the evening cup. You cradle a porcelain bowl of steaming infusion. Leaves from China, sugar from Caribbean islands, milk from English cows, all colonial histories condensed into comfort. You sip, your pulse slows. The ritual works not because of chemistry, but because of rhythm. Sip, sigh, repeat. A quirky anecdote floats by. One London pamphlet in the 1700s warned that drinking tea too late could invite disordered visions. You smile, thinking how many modern nights begin with the same debate. One more cup or guaranteed insomnia. Electric light glows on the horizon, and with it, the modern age of sleeplessness. Gas lamps give way to bulbs. Evenings stretch longer. The line between day and night blurs like ink in water. To compensate, Humans invent new rituals, brushing teeth, winding clocks, setting alarms. Little ceremonies to restore a sense of boundary. Historians still argue whether routine itself is humanity's greatest invention. Repetition comforts because it implies continuity. The sun will rise, the alarm will ring, life will keep looping gently forward. You stroll through a 1950s living room. A black and white television hums. A family signs off with, "Good night." A father checks the front door. A mother smooths a blanket over a sleeping child. Across the world, millions repeat these gestures in near, identical sequence, connected by unseen threads of habit. A mainstream fact by mid-century. Sociologists had coined the phrase, sleep hygiene, encouraging citizens to cultivate calm evenings. The term sounded clinical, but the goal was ancient. Restore the peace that electric life had scattered. You drift into present time. Phones glow like miniature hearths in dark rooms. People scroll, sigh, and finally set the screens face down. A modern equivalent of snuffing a candle. Some play soft music, others let a fan hum them to sleep. And you? Well, you listen to stories like this one. A digital lullaby echoing those ancient chants. Historians still argue whether our devices destroy or reinvent ritual. Maybe both. The pattern endures a deliberate slowing, a symbolic dimming of light, a whispered farewell to wakefulness. You let the noise fade. The fan hum replaces the chant. The blue glow fades into the same darkness that once surrounded every campfire, every monastery cell, every quiet home. The continuum is complete. Different tools, same desire to end the day gently. You breathe out and feel the weight of shared centuries resting across your chest like a soft quilt of habit. Every sigh you take tonight echoes one taken by someone, somewhere, 1,000 years ago. You lie back and let the hush settle in. The candle of ritual has burned low. The fan hums steady, and somewhere inside the darkness another realm begins to breathe. You feel it just behind your eyelids. Colors that don't exist in daylight, voices that sound like memory trying to sing. Dreams. You've slipped into humanity's oldest theater. Historians still argue whether the first dreams were considered messages from gods or just mental noise. But for tens of thousands of years people have woken up certain that the night meant something. You can picture a hunter sits by a morning fire, describing a vision of a white animal, and his tribe nods as though he's reciting weather data. To dream was to receive instruction. A mainstream fact to anchor you. Clay tablets from Mesopotamia, around 2000 BCE, preserve the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the first stories where dreams carry prophecy. Kings there kept professional dream interpreters, who classified visions into good and bad omens. The world was read like a giant bedtime riddle. You walk through one of those cities now. Moonlight glints off ziggurats. Priests chant as they record someone's dream on wet clay. Each symbol, lion, river, falling star, gets logged in an early dream manual. Somewhere a sleepy scribe smears his stylus and mutters that tomorrow he'll dream of quitting. Even then, work dreams existed. A quirky note for your drowsy smile, one Babylonian tablet warns that dreaming of bread means prosperity. Unless the bread is burnt, then expect gossip. The line between divine revelation and office rumor was always thin. You wander onward into ancient Egypt, where dreams were so sacred that temples built special sleep chambers. For oracles, you lie down on a cool stone couch, breathing in incense. Priests called this practice incubation, sleeping in a holy place to invite a message from the gods. If you dreamed of a falcon, it was Horus. A serpent, perhaps healing. You realize humanity's first recorded therapy session happened in a dream. Historians still argue whether these temple sleeps were placebo, trance, or genuine mysticism. Either way, the patients often woke calmer, convinced that unseen forces had spoken kindly through the dark. Now the scene softens. You find yourself in Greece, where philosophers turn dreams into puzzles. Aristotle says they're the mind's leftover impressions, while Plato suspects they open a gate to truth. You can't tell which idea is more comforting, the thought that dreams mean everything, or that they mean nothing at all. A mainstream fact, the sanctuary of Asclepius, god of healing, welcomed pilgrims who slept within its marble halls, hoping for curative dreams. Physicians there even wrote prescriptions based on what the dreamer saw. One tablet describes a man cured of blindness after dreaming a snake licked his eyes. You hope the god also provided tissues. You drift eastward to India, where texts like the Upanishads divide consciousness into waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. 3 states woven like threads of one fabric. A sage sits cross-legged, murmuring that the dreamer and the dreamed are the same. It sounds impossibly modern, as if mindfulness apps stole their copy. A quirky fragment from old Sanskrit lore: if you dream of riding an elephant, prosperity awaits. If you fall off, check your pride. The lesson hasn't aged a day. China's philosophers join in. You meet Zhuang Zhou, who once dreamed he was a butterfly and woke wondering which form was real. That question still floats through every philosophy classroom and late night dorm rooms. Are you the dreamer or the dream? Historians still argue whether Zhuang Zhou meant literal mysticism or just poetic confusion, but the effect remains. The dream becomes philosophy's mirror. Time slides into Rome. You pass under frescoed ceilings where emperors consult interpreters before battle. Cicero, skeptical as ever, calls it superstition. Others claim entire wars turn on a single night's vision. A mainstream fact: the Roman general Constantine reportedly converted to Christianity after dreaming of a cross with the words, "In this sign, conquer." Imagine changing world history because of a nap. The Middle Ages darken around you. Dreams are now suspect, potentially divine, potentially demonic. Priests warn against reading too much into them, yet the same priests keep secret journals of their own visions. You smell ink, candle wax, and contradiction. In monasteries, monks catalogue their night images with the same care as relics: lions for courage, storms for temptation, lilies for purity. A quirky medieval superstition: sleeping on your left side was thought to invite nightmares, while the right side encouraged saintly dreams. You feel yourself roll automatically, just in case. Historians still argue whether dream censorship in this era slowed science, or simply redirected it inward. Either way, humanity learned to keep imagination private, a rehearsal for modern psychology. The Renaissance reopens the dream gates. Artists sketch their visions. Poets claim inspiration from midnight visitations. Leonardo da Vinci fills notebooks with winged contraptions that look suspiciously like fever dreams given geometry. You stand behind him as he murmurs. The mind paints in sleep what the hand dares not by day. He's right, of course, you've done that too, minus the flying machines. A mainstream fact. In 1605, English physician Thomas Hill published one of Europe's most popular dream dictionaries, listing hundreds of symbols. Dream of teeth falling out. Expect change. Dream of water. Emotions. Dream of writing a dream dictionary. Probably exhaustion. Now you tumble into the 19th century, where dreams move from mystic to medical. Freud sits in his Viennese chair, notebook open, declaring that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. You can almost hear him clicking his pen. To him, every image hides desire. Every fall, every flight, every locked door is your mind staging a private drama. You resist the urge to psychoanalyze your own dream about flying sandwiches. Historians still argue whether Freud discovered truth or just built an elegant metaphor. Either way, he gave the modern world permission to take dreams seriously again. Scientifically this time. Jung enters gentler, murmuring about archetypes and collective memory. He calls dreams bridges to myth, shared stories stitched into our DNA. You imagine your dreams filing for union membership in some vast cosmic guild. A quirky tidbit from Jung's notes. He once claimed a patient dreamed of a scarab, just as a real scarab beetle tapped at the window. Proof, he said, of synchronicity. Skeptics shrug, romantics applaud. You just enjoy the symmetry. The century turns. Scientists wire volunteers with electrodes, tracking eye movement. REM sleep gets discovered. Tiny twitches beneath closed lids, proof that the brain is dancing while the body lies still. A mainstream fact in 1953. Researchers Aserinsky and Kleitman recorded the first human REM cycles, mapping the stages of sleep that repeat through every night. The dream world finally has geography. Historians still argue whether dreams serve evolution or indulgence, practice for survival or useless cinema. Neuroscience offers possibilities: emotional regulation, memory sorting, creativity rehearsal. You picture your neurons as librarians filing yesterday's chaos into neat shelves while you snore. A quirky modern twist in sleep labs. Subjects sometimes realize they're dreaming and steer the narrative. Lucid dreaming. One man reportedly used it to rehearse violin solos, another to solve math proofs. You imagine someone using it to rehearse folding laundry, the ultimate pragmatic fantasy. The decades slide toward now. Phones charge beside pillows. Apps record murmured dreams for analysis. Algorithms claim to predict mood based on REM length. Yet, for all the graphs and data, no one can bottle that feeling when a dream dissolves on waking. A taste of mystery vanishing, like breath on glass. You stand at the edge of your own dreamscape. Fragments swirl a staircase that leads nowhere. A friend with a stranger's face. A city made of pillows from Section 4. Your mind reuses old props like a thrifty director. Maybe every dream is a sequel. Historians still argue whether artificial intelligence will ever dream, whether silicon can feel the surreal tug of imagination. You smile at the irony of wondering that question here, half asleep, guided by a machine voice telling ancient bedtime tales. If machines ever dream, maybe they'll dream of you dreaming of them. The air grows softer, the scenes blur. Ancient temples fade into labs, priests into scientists, prophecy into data. Across all of it runs one quiet truth: people need their nights to mean something. Meaning is the blanket we pull over the unknown. You let the thoughts settle. Your breathing evens out, slow and rhythmic, echoing those first dreamers by the fire. Tomorrow's historians may debate what any of this signified, but tonight, you know exactly what it is. A lull between two worlds, where sense and nonsense hold hands until morning. You stir lightly, as if brushing against a veil between night and morning, though the room remains dark. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticks softly, a reminder that humans long ago began to measure what they once only felt. Sleep itself, once mystery and ritual, slowly became a subject of curiosity, even science. Historians still argue whether early philosophers truly understood sleep or merely speculated. But from Aristotle to Galen, people attempted to chart the invisible. You can see them ink, stained fingers tracing diagrams of the brain, scribbling notes on pulses, heartbeats, and humors. Sleep was no longer just a pause, it was a process to decode. A mainstream fact to settle your mind, the Greek physician Galen, in the 2nd century CE, proposed that sleep results from the cooling of blood in the brain, a kind of nightly bodily recalibration. It's not correct by modern standards, but it's a beginning, a first attempt to quantify the rhythm of rest. You wander through a Roman domus at dusk. The household physician checks the walls, the diet, the daily habits, offering remedies to improve slumber, warm baths, wine diluted with honey, or a simple change of bedding. Humans were learning to treat sleep as something that could be encouraged, even optimized. A quirky tidbit in the Middle Ages, a common recommendation for better sleep, involved sleeping with one's feet toward the door, or a candle placed on the windowsill to prevent bad spirits from stealing dreams. You roll your eyes, though secretly you find the ritual oddly charming. Time drifts forward. In Renaissance Italy, physicians dissect brains to understand what happens when eyes close and consciousness drifts. They hypothesize about spirits, vapors, and animal spirits coursing through the body. You lie down, imagining yourself part of these early studies, perhaps the subject of a feather tickle to test eyelid closure. Historians still argue whether these methods were meaningful or more theatrical. But curiosity drives the narrative, as it always does. Sleep is now an experiment, a puzzle, a frontier of human knowledge. The 17th century hums with new ideas. You picture Thomas Willis peering through his rudimentary microscopes, mapping the brain's vessels and wondering about the connection between blood, nerves, and dreams. Meanwhile, in other rooms, astrologers and apothecaries consult the stars and powders, showing that the scientific and mystical still dance together in twilight. A mainstream fact in 1665, Robert Hooke publishes Micrographia, detailing microscopic observations that hint at complexity even in simple organisms. A subtle metaphor for the intricate biology of sleep yet to be discovered. You drift to the 19th century. Napoleon sleeps, soldiers sleep, poets sleep, and physicians start keeping careful records of nightly rest. The first electroencephalograph, EEG hums, in laboratories decades later, revealing the brain's electrical patterns during sleep. You feel the rise of knowledge like a soft wave washing over your eyelids. A quirky note. Early sleep researchers sometimes wired their own eyes with electrodes, essentially turning themselves into test subjects. Imagine that. Human guinea pigs for the sake of understanding blinking, dreaming, and the gentle collapse of consciousness. Historians still argue whether sleep science was more driven by curiosity or vanity, but you know it's a little of both. The human desire to understand, to measure, to map the unseen, pushes even the mundane act of closing one's eyes into the realm of discovery. The 20th century accelerates. Researchers identify REM and non-REM stages. Sleep cycles are plotted, analyzed, and categorized. You feel yourself traveling through those early lab rooms, the faint hum of machines marking every twitch, every pulse. The world begins to see sleep as necessary, measurable, and vital. A mainstream fact in 1953. Serenity and Kleitman observe REM's rapid eye movement, showing that even in stillness, the mind dances in rhythms invisible to the naked eye. You sense your own eyelids moving in gentle imitation, a mirror of centuries of study. By mid-century, modern medicine ties sleep to physical health, emotional regulation, and memory consolidation. People wear masks, electrodes, and sensors, all in pursuit of understanding the invisible choreography of rest. Even the most intimate act, sleeping, becomes data, patterns, and charts. A quirky 20th century anecdote. One researcher fell asleep during an experiment and ended up charting his own snoring cycles, unknowingly contributing to the first sleep apnea studies. Science sometimes works best when the experimenter joins the subject pool. You float past modern neuroscience. PET scans reveal blood flow, fMRI shows active brain regions, and researchers watch as neurotransmitters hum a nocturnal symphony. Historians still argue whether technology will ever fully explain sleep's mysteries. Even with all the charts, the soft exhale of relief when you finally drift into slumber remains impossible to quantify. Now you glimpse the present. Smart devices, sleep apps, and biofeedback promise the perfect night. Weighted blankets, blackout curtains, white noise machines, all modern tools designed to mimic ancient instincts. Darkness, comfort, ritual. You realize the circle is complete. What humans sought for survival, inspiration, and safety has become science and habit. Yet it remains deeply personal. A quirky modern note: sleep studies show that watching a favorite bedtime video, even without content, can signal the brain that it's time to rest. Ritual survives, adapted to technology, bridging the gap between the first hearth fires and today's dim LEDs. You feel your own breath slow. The continuum of sleep science, discovery, and ritual envelops You like a quilt of knowledge. From Aristotle's scribbles to EEG spikes, from temple incense to white noise fans, the story of sleep is human, infinite, and deeply comforting. And as you sink into your own bed, blanket and pillow perfectly aligned, a ritual of your own making, you recognize something timeless. The study of sleep doesn't replace it, it honors it. It whispers that even in understanding, there is space for mystery. For tonight, for you, the science is soft, and the dark is kind. You awaken to the faintest hint of rhythm, a tick so subtle you almost mistake it for a heartbeat. It's the sound of time asserting itself, centuries before your bedside alarm, before digital screens, before anyone could type the words. Sleep schedule. Time itself needed measurement, and with it came the human attempt to organize rest. Historians still argue whether the first timekeepers were practical devices or symbols of power. But either way, humanity became obsessed with counting hours, even in the dark. You picture Neolithic villages, someone raising a stick to mark the sun's path, another tracing shadows on stone, both attempting the same thing, quantifying a day to master life's patterns. A mainstream fact to settle your mind as sundials, used as early as 1500 BCE in Egypt, divided the day into roughly 12 segments, providing one of the first public measures of time. Of course, sundials are useless after sunset, which meant nighttime remained mysterious. Sleep and darkness were still governed by instinct and habit, not measurement. You wander through a Babylonian city, noticing water clocks dripping slowly into stone basins. Citizens rely on the steady drip, marking hours by sound, not sight. You hear the soft plink of water, the first metronome of measured rest, reminding humans that even when the sun sleeps, time does not. A quirky tidbit floats through your thoughts. Some water clocks in Mesopotamia were tied to temple rituals. Priests would pour liquid carefully to time prayers or ceremonial sacrifices. Imagine someone nudging the vessel with their elbow, whispering, "Not too fast, or the gods will be impatient." The narrative drifts east. In ancient China, incense clocks mark the hours through slow-burning sticks and scented powders. Each fragrance signals a different segment of night, guiding monks, officials, and scholars through their cycles of rest, study, or meditation. You inhale the imagined aroma: sandalwood, cinnamon, musk. The passage of time becomes a sensory experience. Historians still argue whether these incense clocks were primarily practical or meditative. But either way, they created a bridge between the measurable and the mystical. Now you step into Greece, where water and sundials share the spotlight. Astronomers, philosophers, and architects debate the length of hours, the timing of festivals, and when the body should rest. You notice how sleep gradually shifts from instinct to calculation, as if humans sought permission from the cosmos itself. A mainstream fact: by the Hellenistic period, public sundials and water clocks were common in cities like Alexandria, coordinating markets, religious ceremonies, and civic life. Sleep still remained personal, but the boundaries of day and night were slowly being charted. The story flows northward into medieval Europe, where mechanical clocks begin to appear in monasteries around the 13th century. Monks no longer rely solely on the sun or stars. Bells toll, marking canonical hours and regulating prayer, work, and rest. You hear the imagined clang echoing through stone halls: vespers, matins, compline. The first, alarm, is not a device but a call to consciousness. A quirky image: some of these early clocks are huge, ornate, and terrifying. Villagers reportedly woke screaming when the first massive tower clocks struck the hour, convinced the apocalypse had begun. Historians still argue whether mechanical time improved lives or simply imposed stress on natural rhythms. You sense that tension, even now, as you picture humans nudged awake by relentless bells. The narrative drifts to Renaissance Italy. Clockmakers refine gears and weights, minute hands appear. Astronomical clocks predict eclipses, Sleep schedules are now negotiable. Wealthy families set beds and wake times according to civic obligation and personal preference. You imagine someone checking the dial before pulling a blanket over themselves, whispering, "Just 10 more minutes." A mainstream fact, by the 17th century, pendulum clocks allowed accuracy within seconds per day, finally bringing household timekeeping into practical reach. People begin to structure evening meals, bedtime rituals, and even dream schedules around measured hours. Quirk creeps back in. One Italian nobleman reportedly had a mechanical servant whose sole function was to lift his eyelids at dawn. Sleep, for some, was no longer organic. It was engineered. You move into the modern era. Pocket watches, alarm clocks, and eventually digital displays dictate when humans should wake and when to sleep. Time becomes a commodity, a tool, and sometimes a tyrant. Historians still argue whether the obsession with measured time has improved productivity or stolen serenity from the night. You feel it now, the subtle tension between natural sleep and the tick-tock of human invention. Yet, even with schedules, alarms, and devices, ritual persists. Bedtime stories, lullabies, gentle breathing. All these continue alongside the clocks, a reminder that the human spirit negotiates with time rather than submits to it. A quirky modern note: the first vibrating alarm watches were created in the 20th century for hearing impaired sleepers, a silent insistence that even sleep must honor schedules. You smile, imagining centuries of humans learning the same lesson in different ways. The night is precious, and time, measured or not, is a partner, not a master. You close your eyes, hearing imagined ticks and drips fading into silence. The story of timekeeping and sleep blends into the soft hum of your own breathing. The centuries of clocks, bells, and water basins gather like a protective net, cradling you gently, reminding you that humans have always sought to understand rest. Even as devices beep and screens glow in other bedrooms, the primal rhythm persists. The slow heartbeat of night measured, honored, and softened. You drift, carried by history's gentle insistence. Sleep is necessary, mysterious, and entirely human. You open your eyes just enough to notice a faint glow in the corner of the room, soft and amber, barely brushing your eyelashes. It's not the sun, not the moon, not a distant star. It's something crafted by human hands, light for the night, a companion in darkness. Historians still argue whether early nightlights were purely practical or ritualistic, but for thousands of years, humans have discovered that darkness is not absolute. You can picture an ancient household in Mesopotamia. Oil lamps with clay wicks drip steadily, shadows dancing on mud walls. Somebody hums softly while they tend the flame, ensuring that children sleep safely without fear of prowling animals or uneven floors. A mainstream fact to anchor your mind: simple oil lamps date back to at least 4500 BCE in what is now Israel and Turkey. They burned olive oil or animal fat, casting soft illumination that extended waking hours into the deep evening, and, crucially, provided a buffer for sleep preparation. You drift through an Egyptian corridor, where small lamps glow beside beds carved from cedar. Priests and nobles alike keep them burning through the night, sometimes with magical inscriptions on the lamp holder to ward off nightmares or wandering spirits. You feel the faint heat on your skin, the gentle flicker of shadow moving like a dance partner across the wall. A quirky tidbit floats past. In medieval Europe, people sometimes kept straw candles, twisted reeds soaked in tallow, on the floor near sleeping spaces. They were smoky, uneven, and dangerous, but they ensured that the sleeper would wake before complete darkness swallowed the room. You imagine someone rolling over in bed and muttering, "Next time, more tallow." Time folds again. In ancient China, bronze lamps filled with sesame oil mark nighttime hours in palaces and temples. The aroma is subtle, comforting, a silent signal to the body that night is not solely for danger, but also for reflection and rest. Historians still argue whether night illumination delayed natural sleep, or simply made it safer. Either way, humans were experimenting with the interplay of light and shadow, learning that the eye and mind needed cues to slow down. You drift to Greece, where lamps hang from chains or sit in terracotta bowls. They illuminate philosophers reading quietly before bed, scribbling observations about the stars, dreams, and the humors. Light is now a tool for study and ritual, a guide from wakefulness into the softer twilight of consciousness. A mainstream fact: Roman lamps became ubiquitous by the 1st century CE, mass-produced in clay molds and sometimes inscribed with simple phrases, jokes, or good wishes for the sleeper. One lamp might bear the message, "Sleep well, and may fortuna smile." You pass into the medieval period, where nightlights evolve in tandem with faith. Candles are placed near bedsides to ward off spirits, to signal prayer hours, or simply to avoid tripping on uneven floors. A mother watches over a sick child, adjusting the candle so the glow touches the blanket just right, leaving shadowed corners for comfort and imagination. A quirky detail: some European households placed small mirrors behind candles to reflect light across the room, creating a magical doubling effect. It probably terrified cats, but it pleased children and priests alike. The Renaissance dazzles with innovation. Brass lanterns, glass globes, and tallow candles allow night, time reading and work, merging practicality with artistry. You imagine a scholar reading by this golden light, tracing words with fingertip and absorbing knowledge while the night hums around them. Historians still argue whether increased illumination disrupted natural circadian rhythms or simply enhanced evening productivity. You sense the tension even now, as modern lights glow faintly through city windows, reminding us that the struggle between dark and light persists. The story drifts into the 19th century. Gas lamps light bedrooms, hallways, and streets, offering safer passage and the option to read, write, or prepare for sleep on demand. Night is no longer purely dark, but softened by a controlled glow. You picture a family adjusting the gas flame, dimming it before bed to signal the nervous system that rest is near. A mainstream fact by the 1800s, night lamps, designed specifically for bedrooms, became commercially available in Europe and America. They were small, portable, and designed to provide enough light to navigate, but not so much as to disrupt rest. Quirk creeps back in. Victorian manuals recommended colored glass shades for lamps to produce a calming effect. Blue to soothe, amber to relax, red to, well, not alarm anyone. You imagine a sleepy Victorian child asking, "Mother, is this blue enough for dreams?" The 20th century hums with electricity. Incandescent bulbs replace oil and gas. Dimming switches and bedside lamps give individuals unprecedented control over their environment. Historians still argue whether the shift from flame to electric light improved sleep, or simply allowed humans to ignore natural circadian cues. Nightlights evolve small, soft. LEDs, sometimes shaped like moons or stars, offer companionship without disturbing the body's rhythm. Some families leave them on for safety, others for ritual, others simply to comfort the imagination. You sense the same instinct that guided the Mesopotamian parent, or the Egyptian noble persists: humans do not sleep alone, even when alone. A quirky modern anecdote: a 21st century study found that nightlights with warm colors reduce stress in children, whereas cool or blue tones can subtly delay sleep onset. You smile, realizing that ancient intuitions about light and mood were more accurate than anyone imagined. You close your eyes and feel the glow fade behind your eyelids, replaced by the internal warmth of memory, routine, and ritual. The centuries of lamps, candles, lanterns, and LEDs form a soft constellation over your mind, guiding you from wakefulness into the gentle sea of sleep. Time measured, light softened, the night remains a gentle companion. You inhale slowly, exhale deeply, and drift, cradled in the intersection of shadow, flame, and human curiosity. The story of illumination for sleep is not about science or magic alone. It is about care, presence, and the timeless desire to feel safe in the dark. You sink deeper into your bed, feeling the familiar contours of blankets and pillows molding to your body. Somewhere beneath the soft layers, there's an invisible thread linking you to countless generations who, like you, sought comfort in objects during sleep. They are small, tactile anchors, holding anxiety at bay while the mind drifts into the mysterious world of dreams. Historians still argue whether these comfort objects were originally practical or symbolic, but the impulse is universal. You can see a prehistoric child clutching a carved bone or a smooth pebble, tracing its surface with fingers to feel a sense of safety in the darkness. Even the smallest object could carry immense reassurance. A mainstream fact to settle your mind: anthropologists have found that children across cultures have long used transitional objects, items that bridge the space between dependency and independence, to soothe anxiety at bedtime. The earliest examples may have been small animal figurines, soft skins, or even specially selected stones. You wander through ancient Egypt. Noble children sleep with tiny dolls made of cloth and straw, sometimes scented with lavender or frankincense. The dolls are more than toys. They are companions, carriers of prayers, talismans against nightmares. You imagine holding one, feeling the texture beneath your palm, comforted not just by softness, but by the thought that unseen forces might be watching over you. A quirky tidbit floats past. Some dolls were wrapped in miniature shrouds, mimicking adult burials, so the child could practice empathy or ritual before they understood the word. It's oddly somber and sweet, like early emotional training wheels. Time folds forward. In medieval Europe, monks and nuns crafted embroidered pillows and soft, stuffed animals for children in convents and palaces. These objects often bore symbolic imagery: lions for courage, stars for guidance, flowers for innocence. You notice how tactile sensation and symbolism intertwine, offering both physical and psychological comfort. Historians still argue whether these items were primarily for emotional regulation or social instruction. But either way, they became woven into the fabric of childhood. You drift into Japan, where small handcrafted dolls, called omamori or plush cushions, filled with rice appear in bedrooms and shrines. Some are intended to protect sleepers from harm, others to guarantee good fortune in dreams. You imagine a child clutching one under the faint glow of a nightlight, the scent of incense mingling with the softness beneath their chin. A mainstream fact: the Victorian era popularized soft toys for children in Europe, with mass-produced stuffed animals, particularly teddy bears, appearing in the early 20th century. They became cultural icons of comfort, often kept not just by children, but by adults seeking tactile reassurance. Quirk re-enters gently. One English study in the 1930s documented children who refused to sleep without sleeping companions, ranging from, well, worn bears to carved wooden animals, believing them to be semi-conscious protectors. You smile, thinking how imagination and need merge in such tiny forms. The narrative drifts to quilts and patchwork blankets. In colonial America, women stitched scraps of worn fabric into quilts, layering memories and warmth simultaneously. You feel the tactile rhythm of stitched lines and patches, as if each one carries the pulse of past nights and distant generations. These objects were not just warmth, they were continuity, a tangible link between yesterday and today. Historians still argue whether the patchwork quilt's function was more practical or emotional, but each stitch undoubtedly offered security and ritual. You wander into modern bedrooms. Weighted blankets, stuffed animals, sleep masks, even soft headphones, all designed to offer sensory reassurance. A mainstream fact: weighted blankets, inspired by therapeutic deep pressure techniques, are clinically shown to reduce anxiety and improve sleep quality. You wrap yourself gently, feeling centuries of tactile habit beneath your skin. A quirky note: some children, and even adults, sleep with an odd assortment of objects: dismantled plushes, knitted squares, or even rocks chosen for their smoothness, often giving them nicknames and personalities. Your mind drifts at the thought somewhere a rock named Gerald is keeping a child company tonight, just as clay dolls comforted children in ancient Egypt. You sink further into this lineage of comfort. Objects are more than tools. They are bridges, carriers of emotion, ritual, and continuity. Even the faintest scent of fabric, the tactile imprint of stitching, the soft press of a toy into your side, connects you to countless sleepers before you. As you exhale, the room becomes quiet. The objects surrounding you are not just items. They are companions, anchors, gentle guides through the night. You let your body mold around the textures, feel the warmth, and recognize the continuity of human desire to be soothed, to be safe, to drift unafraid into the dark. Historians still argue whether these comfort objects are necessary for adulthood. But tonight, yours is all you need. You shift under the blankets, feeling a gentle tug in your stomach, a memory of taste brushing the edges of your mind. Humans have always eaten and drunk before sleep, not out of hunger alone, but to coax the body into calm, to create ritual, and sometimes to chase dreams. Tonight, you wander through the aromas and textures of bedtime cuisine across centuries. Historians still argue whether early nighttime snacks were practical or ceremonial, but either way, people sought both comfort and function. You can see a Mesopotamian family dipping bread into honey, a small draught of warm beer at the side, smoke curling lazily from the hearth. Sleep was guided by ritual taste and a subtle sense of preparation. A mainstream fact: fermented beverages like beer were common in ancient societies, not just for pleasure, but because water was often unsafe to drink. A sip before bed could both nourish and calm, a nightly insurance policy against thirst and restlessness. You drift into ancient Egypt. A woman crushes dates into a sweet paste, stirs a small cup of barley drink, and sets it beside her child's bed. The scent of figs and honey mixes with reed mats and papyrus scrolls. Food here is a conduit, an extension of ritual offerings to gods, sustenance for the body, and markers that the day is ending. A quirky tidbit: some Egyptians placed small bowls of milk and honey near the bedside as an offering to dream gods, believing that drinking from them could induce prophetic visions. You smile, imagining tiny sips meant to summon inspiration in sleep. Time drifts to Greece. You watch an elder steep herbs, valerian, chamomile, or mint, into warm water, serving the beverage slowly. The ritual is deliberate, a signal that the mind should slow, the body relax, and dreams may come uninvited. Historians still argue whether these herbal practices were medicinal or symbolic, but effectiveness seems undeniable. In Rome, wine is common, diluted with honey or water. A mainstream fact: Pliny the Elder recommended warm milk or wine with spices to soothe restlessness. You imagine the warmth spreading through your limbs, the gentle buzz easing muscles into repose. You drift northward to medieval Europe. Evening porridges, gruels, and spiced milks accompany bedtime prayers. A child sucks at a warm bowl of oat porridge while a mother hums a lullaby, the taste and rhythm merging into a tactile ritual of comfort. Food signals the brain that night has arrived, marking the day's end with small, digestible milestones. A quirky note in some medieval manuscripts: recipes for sleeping draughts included everything from poppy seeds to lettuce boiled in milk, claimed to induce deep sleep, or at least amusing dreams. You imagine a kitchen full of herbal smoke, a cat eyeing the bubbling cauldron, and a parent muttering, "Hopefully it works tonight." The Renaissance introduces sophistication. Nightcaps become fashionable among the wealthy: warm wine, spiced milk, or a cup of honeyed water. You picture a scholar sipping slowly by candlelight, each swallow signaling a gentle transition from the day's demands to the surrender of night. Historians still argue whether nightcaps were primarily medicinal, social, or indulgent. The ritual persists regardless warm liquid, calm posture, and measured breath. Time folds again. In colonial America, warm milk and honey persist. In Europe, teas made from imported leaves become popular in the evening. You notice the subtle difference. Tea offers ritual, flavor, and caffeine moderation, blending pleasure and preparation in one careful sip. A quirky modern observation in 19th century England. Night tea was a common remedy for insomnia, often prepared with lavender or chamomile, giving rise to what we now consider herbal bedtime teas. Some households kept dedicated sleep cups, reserved only for evening ritual, a private vessel marking the boundary between wakefulness and rest. You drift toward Asia. In Japan, roasted barley tea, warm and nutty, accompanies evening baths, preparing the digestive system and the mind for stillness. In India, warm milk infused with cardamom or saffron becomes both comfort and tradition, signaling that the day is complete. Food and drink are not just sustenance, they are cues, softly spoken commands to body and mind alike. A mainstream fact: modern research confirms that warm milk contains tryptophan, which can modestly improve sleep onset, demonstrating that ancient intuition had biochemical backing. Quirk returns. In some medieval European households, leftover bread was soaked in honey or wine and consumed before bed to prevent nightmares, an early example of dream cuisine. You chuckle at the continuity. Humans have long believed food can shape the content and quality of sleep, blending practicality and superstition. Now you are in the 20th century. Warm milk, herbal teas, and light snacks persist alongside modern sleep science. Weighted blankets, soft lighting, and measured beverages form a constellation of preparation rituals. You realize that the foods and drinks you consume before bed are echoes of thousands of years of experimentation, instinct, and cultural practice. You sip, chew, breathe, and relax. The act is ordinary yet ancient. From Mesopotamian honey draughts to modern chamomile tea, humans have always sought to tiptoe from hunger and thirst into the arms of sleep. You exhale slowly, feeling the ritual settle around you. The night is edible, drinkable, and nurturing. Centuries of practice guide your body and mind, and you drift nourished, calm, and entirely at ease. You wiggle beneath the blankets, feeling the gentle embrace of soft fabric against your skin, and realize that how humans dress for sleep is almost as old a ritual as the fire, the pillow, or the lullaby. Clothing for rest is both practical and symbolic, a quiet envelope separating the waking world from the dream world. Historians still argue whether sleep-specific clothing existed in antiquity, or if everyday garments sufficed. But evidence suggests humans have long experimented with fabrics, cuts, and layers to optimize comfort and safety. You picture a Bronze Age villager, wrapped in animal hides or woven linen, curling up on a straw mat while night chills seep through the air. The purpose is clear: warmth, protection, and psychological security. A mainstream fact in ancient Egypt, wealthy individuals often slept in light linen tunics to allow air circulation, balancing the need for modesty and comfort in a warm climate. For others, sleeping naked was common, reflecting climate, social norms, and practical comfort. You drift into medieval Europe. Homes are drafty, stone walls absorb heat during the day but chill at night. Humans layer woolen shirts, tunics, or loose chemises for sleep. Children and adults alike rely on multiple layers to retain warmth. A mother adjusts her child's nightshirt and tucks the hems carefully, ensuring no cold air sneaks in. A quirky tidbit in the 14th century. Some European households used nightcaps, knitted or linen hats worn to prevent heat loss from the head, a practice that seems both quaint and ingenious today. You imagine rolling over and realizing the cap slipped off mid-sleep, then tugging it back up, a centuries-old bedtime frustration. Time folds to Japan. You see a kimono, like sleep robe, loose and breathable, allowing comfort while maintaining modesty. Silk and cotton are preferred. Sometimes special patterns indicate status or season. Historians still argue whether these robes were meant for practicality, ceremony, or aesthetic expression, but their elegance suggests all three. In early modern Europe, sleepwear begins to evolve. Nightshirts are longer, softer, and sometimes adorned with embroidery. You notice the subtle interplay of warmth, modesty, and status. A mainstream fact by the 17th century, nightshirts were common among all social classes in England, varying only in material and decoration. Quirk sneaks in again. Some nightshirts had pocket features, tiny sewn-in pouches for keeping notes, keys, or charms, showing that humans sometimes multitasked, even while preparing to sleep. You smile at the thought of someone reading a note mid-slumber, half-conscious. The narrative drifts to colonial America. Homes are cold in winter, bedding alone isn't enough. Flannel and linen nightshirts, combined with layered blankets, keep families warm. You imagine someone slipping into their flannel, feeling the rough softness against their skin and exhaling a sigh of relief. Sleepwear is utilitarian but comforting, a tangible layer of care. Historians still argue whether sleepwear accelerated modern ideas of hygiene and privacy or simply reflected climate adaptation. Either way, covering the body intentionally for rest becomes a shared human practice. The 19th century introduces pajamas to Europe and America. Originating from South Asia, these two-piece sets of trousers and loose shirts revolutionized sleepwear, emphasizing freedom of movement and comfort. You picture someone in Victorian London, wrapping themselves in cotton pajamas, feeling novelty and liberation with every stretch. A mainstream fact by the late 1800s, pajamas become fashionable for men and women in the Western world, reflecting global cultural exchange and a growing appreciation for sleep-specific garments. A quirky modern note in some early 20th century advertisements, pajamas were marketed not only for comfort but for morality, claiming that proper sleepwear encouraged virtue and modesty. You smirk, imagining a stern ad for moral pajamas. You drift further into the 20th and 21st centuries. Flannel, cotton, silk, synthetics, and fleece offer endless variations. The ritual of changing into nightwear signals the transition from day to night, work to rest. Historians still argue whether pajamas are truly necessary or a psychological cue. But you know that slipping into soft fabric carries a comfort older than words. Now you feel the weight of millennia in the softness of your own pajamas. From prehistoric hides to modern cotton, the story of nighttime clothing is one of warmth, care, ritual, and subtle luxury. It cradles you as blankets do, signaling safety, separation from day, and readiness for dreams. You exhale slowly, letting centuries of layered fabric wrap around your body and mind. The story of sleepwear is simple, yet profound. Humans have always understood that rest deserves its own costume, a quiet armor for the soul. You sink deeper into your blankets, feeling the gentle pull of night against your eyelids, and notice that even the softest pillow cannot alone summon the mind's drift into dreams. Humans have always needed guidance, cues, and comfort, which is where ritual and storytelling enter, the invisible threads that carry a sleeper safely from consciousness into the gentle void. Historians still argue whether early bedtime rituals were primarily religious, educational, or merely soothing, but they exist everywhere. You can see a Mesopotamian parent murmuring a lullaby while tracing a child's fingers over symbols drawn in clay dust. The chant is slow, deliberate, and rhythmic, creating safety and continuity in the dark. A mainstream fact, lullabies are among the oldest forms of oral tradition, documented in Sumerian texts as far back as 2000 BCE, blending melody, repetition, and emotional bonding. Even if the lyrics were simple or repetitive, The effect was profound. Sleep was cued, fear softened, and attachment strengthened. You drift into ancient Egypt. Parents rock children near reed mats and earthen lamps, whispering stories of gods, stars, and heroic ancestors. These tales carry moral guidance, cultural memory, and reassurance. You feel the air thick with warmth, incense, and the comfort of continuity, as though each word forms a soft net around the child's mind. A quirky tidbit floats past. Some Egyptian bedtime stories warn children not to sleep too deeply, lest the ka, or life, force, wander off. Imagine a cosmic parental nudge to wake gently. You smile, picturing sleepy eyes half lidded with concern for spiritual logistics. Time drifts to Greece. A scholar murmurs myth to his child, stories of heroes and gods, full of adventure, mischief, and subtle morals. These tales double as education and bedtime ritual, weaving values into imagination. Historians still argue whether these myths were intended for entertainment or moral instruction, but their impact is undeniable. In Rome, bedtime stories expand into family ritual. Children hear of Romulus and Remus, tales of gods, emperors, and legendary deeds. A mainstream fact: Roman parents often read aloud from texts or recited oral stories, establishing both literacy and cultural continuity at night. You wander into medieval Europe. Evening prayers precede bedtime stories. Families gather around hearths, monks or nannies recite Bible passages, fables, or folk tales. You can almost hear the rhythm of candle flicker against wall, a soft accompaniment to voice and memory. A quirky note in some villages: children were told cautionary tales about creatures hiding under straw mattresses, serving as both discipline and a soft thrill. You imagine a small child clutching a pillow, half terrified, half entranced, their imagination fueled safely by the ritual. The Renaissance enhances storytelling. Printed books allow literacy to meet ritual. Scholars, parents, and nannies read aloud from poetry, fables, and early novels. Bedtime becomes an opportunity to transmit culture, knowledge, and imagination. You notice how even mundane tales can soften the mind, a precursor to dream preparation. Historians still argue whether bedtime reading promotes better sleep or simply stimulates curiosity too late, but rituals persist. In Asia, ritual blends with philosophy. Japan, India, and China create bedtime chants, moral parables, and calming narratives that guide children's thoughts. In Japan, Cataribe recite stories for both moral guidance and relaxation. In India, epic tales like the Mahabharata or Ramayana are told in fragments, adapted for children, embedding rhythm, cadence, and ethical reflection. You feel the universal truth storytelling at night softens fear, binds generations, and prepares the mind for dreams. The 19th and 20th centuries see a shift. Nursery rhymes, fairy tales, and children's literature expand globally. A mainstream fact, bedtime reading becomes a common practice in Europe and America, promoted as both educational and soothing. Even adults begin reading to themselves, absorbing rhythm, narrative, and imagination before sleep. A quirky modern observation: psychologists note that children who hear repeated bedtime stories show stronger memory consolidation, suggesting that ritual and narrative may literally enhance the transition into sleep. You imagine a parent reading the same story night after night, each repetition a gentle lull against uncertainty. You drift into the present. Audiobooks, apps, and whispered podcasts serve the same purpose, guiding the mind gently, creating a consistent ritual, and signaling that the day has ended. Historians still argue whether digital storytelling is equivalent to oral tradition, but the human need for ritual and narrative remains unchanged. You inhale slowly, exhale slowly, and feel the centuries of bedtime stories settle around you. The warmth of routine, the comfort of narrative, and the rhythm of repetition all conspire to carry the mind toward dreams. Your eyelids grow heavy, guided by the same impulses that have soothed children, adults, and even scholars for millennia. You feel the weight of night pressing gently against your shoulders. Yet somewhere in the recesses of history, not everyone drifted so effortlessly. Humans have long struggled with sleeplessness, nightmares, and restless limbs, and across centuries, people have sought remedies to coax the mind into rest. Historians still argue whether ancient reports of sleep disorders reflect true pathology or culturally influenced interpretation. But the human need for relief is universal. You can picture an Egyptian priest mixing herbs in a small clay bowl, murmuring incantations while a patient lies on a reed mat, restless and frightened of phantoms in the dark. A mainstream fact: ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian texts include descriptions of nightmares, insomnia, and restless sleep, alongside herbal or ritualistic treatments intended to restore calm. Even then, humans recognized that some nights could be cruel, and preparation was necessary. You drift into Greece. Hippocrates observes sleepless patients, associating insomnia with imbalance of humors. He prescribes warm baths, diet adjustments, and calming routines. An early attempt to treat sleeplessness as a physiological condition rather than solely a spiritual one. A quirky tidbit floats past. Some Greek remedies involved soaking the feet in cool water or hanging a small bundle of herbs above the bed to ward off disturbing dreams. You imagine wiggling toes, the faint aroma of sage or mint curling into the room. Time drifts to Rome. Physicians like Galen document night frights and restless sleep, recommending a combination of diet, relaxation, and environmental adjustments. You sense the first inklings of modern sleep hygiene emerging. Temperature control, nutrition, and gentle ritual. Historians still argue whether these interventions were genuinely effective or mostly placebo, but the effort demonstrates a timeless human desire to conquer the night's uncertainties. You wander into medieval Europe. Insomnia and nightmares are often seen as spiritual attacks, worries about demons, curses, or divine displeasure. Priests prescribe prayers, protective charms, or simple reassurance to soothe the troubled sleeper. A mainstream fact: monkish manuscripts describe herbs like valerian, hops, and lavender being employed to calm restlessness, blending superstition and early pharmacology. A quirky note: some medieval remedies recommended placing a fresh cat on the bed to absorb nocturnal fears, a practice both whimsical and soothing for the human imagination. You chuckle, picturing a cat curled snugly on a restless sleeper. The Renaissance refines these approaches. Medical texts emphasize hygiene, regular schedules, and herbal remedies. Physicians advise warm baths, moderate evening meals, and calm routines. Historians still argue whether the Renaissance focus on rational remedies represented true understanding or merely sophisticated superstition. But the practices begin to resemble modern sleep advice. You drift northward to Asia. Traditional Chinese medicine links sleep disorders to imbalances in qi or internal organ function, prescribing herbal teas, acupuncture, and gentle breathing exercises. You inhale the imagined aroma of chrysanthemum or jujube root, feeling centuries of ritual and science overlap. A mainstream fact in Ayurveda: warm milk with spices like nutmeg or saffron is recommended for restless minds, echoing modern practices of calming evening beverages. The 19th and early 20th centuries see sleep disorders recognized as medical conditions. Insomnia, sleepwalking, and nightmares enter the lexicon of physicians. You sense the slow emergence of neurology and psychology, guiding humanity toward evidence-based remedies. A quirky modern observation: Victorian era sleep globes were sometimes filled with scented liquids that supposedly released calming vapors during the night, an early attempt at aromatherapy for rest. You imagine a globe glowing softly on a bedside table, the scent mingling with candlelight. The 20th century brings technology and clinical research. Electroencephalographs reveal the mechanics of sleep, sleep labs document disorders, and behavioral therapies emerge. Historians still argue whether early treatments truly cured patients or merely comforted them, but understanding grows. You feel yourself drift alongside these discoveries, the mind and body gradually synchronizing to the rhythm of centuries of trial and error. Modern sleep medicine now integrates lifestyle, medication, and technology. Weighted blankets, white noise machines, cognitive behavioral therapy, and gentle herbal teas all provide relief. You realize the centuries of remedies, from clay bowls and incantations to EEG, monitored interventions, share one common thread. Humans are never passive in the face of the night. You exhale slowly, imagining restless sleepers across time, finally finding relief. The room around you is still, shadows gentle, the world outside quiet. Even the most stubborn insomnia eventually yields to ritual, attention, and care, leaving only calm and the promise of dreams. You feel the gentle pull of night again, the kind that nudges your body to relax while your mind begins its quiet descent. Modern humans have inherited millennia of sleep wisdom rituals, objects, foods, clothing, stories, remedies, all converging into the subtle art of resting well. Historians still argue whether modern sleep science fully captures the experience of sleep, or merely maps its machinery. But the pursuit continues. You can picture scientists in dim labs, electrodes clipped to scalp and eyelids, screens tracing rhythms invisible to the naked eye. Every twitch, every pulse, every fleeting dream is measured, quantified, and sometimes gently manipulated. A mainstream fact: contemporary research identifies REM and non-REM cycles, circadian rhythms, and the neurochemical orchestra that guides slumber. You feel the hum of understanding beneath the surface of your awareness, a delicate alignment of neurons and chemicals sculpting rest. You drift past wearable sleep monitors and apps, which chart heart rate, breathing, and motion. Even in your own bedroom, subtle cues, a soft fan, a warm blanket, dim lighting, mimic ancient practices refined by centuries of trial and observation. Historians still argue whether technology aids sleep or disrupts it, but the human impulse to experiment and optimize persists. Quirk creeps in softly. Some modern sleepers now use weighted eye masks, aromatherapy diffusers, or binaural beats to influence their dreams. You imagine a room bathed in soft light, gentle hums, and comforting scents, the air rich with intention and care. Time folds forward. Sleep hygiene, cognitive behavioral therapy, and melatonin supplements reflect a scientific layering atop centuries of tradition. You notice how the past informs the present: nightcaps, warm milk, bedtime stories, and tactile comfort all echo in the protocols of modern sleep clinics. A quirky historical callback. Remember the Mesopotamian child clutching a carved pebble for security. Tonight, your weighted blanket or favorite pillow plays the same role. A gentle whisper that safety and routine still matter, even in the 21st century. You wander through the neuroscience of dreams. Scientists study the mind's nightly theater: dreams, memory consolidation, emotional processing. A mainstream fact: REM sleep is essential for cognitive function, creativity, and emotional regulation, highlighting the importance of the cycles first glimpsed by EEG pioneers. Historians still argue whether dream content can be reliably interpreted, but the mystery remains compelling. You feel a soft kinship with the ancients who whispered prayers, drank herbal teas, and told stories, not unlike modern therapy or dream journaling, seeking understanding in the darkness. The story moves into culture. Globalization, urbanization, and technology shape modern sleep patterns. You sense the tension between natural rhythms and artificial light, work schedules and entertainment, echoing debates that began with the first lamps and fire-lit nights. Yet humans adapt, layering ritual atop technology to recreate a sense of calm. Quirk surfaces again. Some studies now suggest sleeping with certain sounds or scents can influence mood and dream clarity, a modern echo of incense clocks and herbal draughts. You imagine centuries of experimentation distilled into one perfect night's environment. Finally, you recognize continuity. From prehistoric hides to smart mattresses, from lullabies to podcasts, humans have always sought to guide the mind into rest. The tools change, the rituals evolve, but the impulse remains to surrender gently, safely, and comfortably to sleep. You exhale slowly, feeling the weave of history, science, and care cradle you. The room darkens, shadows stretch soft and long. The body, mind, and spirit align, tuned by millennia of human observation, creativity, and tenderness. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift together. Sleep is not merely absence. It is continuity, curiosity, comfort, and quiet magic. You inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and let the night take you, cradled by thousands of years of gentle human intention. Wind down 300 words, your eyelids grow heavier with each breath. The room is quiet, shadows fold into one another, soft and protective. You feel the gentle hum of air, the faint warmth of blankets, and the subtle comfort of familiar textures around you. All the centuries of human attention to rest. The lamps, the pillows, the stories, the teas, the pajamas, the rituals, seem to settle into this moment. Even the restless nights of the past, the herbs, charms, and strange concoctions, carry forward their legacy, reminding you that sleep is always cared for, always attended, and always sacred. You breathe slowly, allowing the slow rhythm to sink into your chest, your stomach, your mind. The mind drifts across time, touching ancient Mesopotamian night rituals, Egyptian lamps, Greek lullabies, medieval remedies, and modern sleep science. You realize that sleep has always been human, universal, and profoundly intimate, a silent thread connecting all generations. The darkness around you is no longer threatening, it is a gentle canvas for dreams. Your body softens further, muscles melting into the bed. Your mind releases thoughts like leaves floating down a calm stream, each worry dissolving with each exhale. Tonight, sleep is effortless, guided by the accumulated wisdom of millennia. You float in comfort, warmth, and ritual, wrapped in a cocoon of human ingenuity and care. Even the faintest sound or scent carries reassurance, a reminder that rest has always been nurtured and protected.